Good morning, poker players, grinders, carrot poker enthusiasts. This is Pete, and welcome to another episode of the Carrot Poker Podcast. Thank you so much for the feedback and stuff about the book and everything that's been going on there. A lot of you guys have kind of come out of the woodwork. Actually, I made a thread on 2+2, and a few people don't really use 2+2 very much, but a few people kind of emerged who I'd never seen before. I was expecting maybe some of my students to come on and give me reviews, but just random people who bought the book through following the podcast came on and gave me some feedback privately, publicly. I really appreciate all that stuff, guys. Keep it coming. Still in the early promotion stages with the book right now, but things are going so far so good, I would say. Today I want to do a special kind of segment on a concept I just thought about this morning as I was making a video for grinderschool.com, as I kind of like to do. It's kind of weird because my girlfriend came home from night shift and then I just woke up at 7 a.m. and couldn't sleep, so what better time to play some poker when the games are, all the drunk people have gone to bed, so the games are reg infested, and it's a lovely day and I'm just sat inside making podcasts. But hey, it's good fun to make poker stuff too. So we're going to talk today about what I call external variance. External variance is a new concept. I kind of love making up concepts because it's just fun. There are so many concepts that should exist in poker literature that don't, so I kind of like to coin them, I guess. So what is external variance? External variance is, it's variance that is external to the luck of the cards. So we kind of take external variance for granted. It's kind of going on behind the scenes. We don't really know that it's there. There's just lots of other factors other than which cards actually get dealt to you, fall down, and what your opponents bet and stuff like that matter in poker. So I want to talk about some of the non-obvious, non-card odds related variance. This is not a podcast about getting sucked out on or getting two-outed or running into the top of someone's c-bet range all the time or having no fold equity for a whole session due to running bad. It's not about that kind of card related variance at all. It's about other kinds of variance. I'm going to separate external variance into 5 different points. Why, first of all, is it important to acknowledge external variance? Well, it helps us in a lot of ways. First of all, it can help us fine-tune our game and realize that by realizing that external variance exists, we can play in more favorable conditions, because unlike poker, card-related variance, sometimes external variance is actually very predictable, how it's going to affect the way you play, how it's going to affect your expectation and your EV. And so having a good grasp of the 5 factors I'm about to go through can help us play when it's the best time to play and avoid playing otherwise. And it can also help us just appreciate that there are inconsistencies in our ability just based on the fact that our brain is a chemical, biological process that has variance to it. Some days it works better than others. And the first point that I'm going to go over today is brain power variance. So what does this mean? What does this part of external variance mean? Well, it's to do with the fact that, you've probably experienced this yourselves. You sit down, you play a session, and sometimes everything just feels like it's working. You're playing your A game, everything's clicking, it's just going right, there's no problems in your game. Thought processes are clear, concepts that you learned a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a year ago are equally prominent in your head. Ideas are free-flowing, and it's what some poker players describe as being in the zone, or really it's just your brain performing better than usual. Things that can give you brain power variance are playing when you're in a good state of mind, positive brain power variance. Some of it's just completely random, some days you play better than others, but there will be things that affect it, just how well your mind is functioning. So a nice test, it's kind of you wouldn't embark upon a high-speed internet operation if your connection was crap, so you'd probably test it first at one of these broadband speed checker sites. Similarly for poker, you can test your brain power by opening up one table and just trying to think and just seeing how it's going, and just have a minimum standard that you're willing to accept. What's the weakest, brain power that you're willing to play a session under and still be significantly plus EV, such that it's worth playing that session and there's not that much risk of getting tilted, etc. And identify what that is, what your kind of average is and what a little bit below the average would be. And the worst brain power you should really accept for playing a session should be somewhere a little bit below average. You shouldn't be playing when you're massively below your average brain power. There'll be things that affect this late at night after eating. Mine is when I come out of a bath. If I take a bath, which is very rarely, I tend to shower more than actually bathe. But if I do, I tend to sit down and my head just doesn't think. It's just a big mushy bleh. It just doesn't bother. I don't know why. Raised body temperature, who knows? But The good thing about external variance is that unlike internal variance, i.e. the way the cards fall, external variance can actually be anticipated, predicted, and accounted for. Brainpower variance is partly completely random, or at least it's not random, but it's down to factors that we can't compute. Just like internal poker variance is down to factors like the algorithm that generates the cards on PokerStars. We can't compute that, we don't know what it is, so we can't account for it. Similarly, in our brain, there'll be just things going on in there, neurological processes that we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. They cause us to play worse. We can't do anything about that. We don't know when that's going to happen, but we can test drive it and we can see how we're playing. And if it feels particularly sluggish, bad, emotional, just unlikely to produce clear, rational, logical, problem-solving thought processes, then we can just terminate our session early. Take a break, do something first, warm up. Sometimes when you suffer from poor brain power variance, like you sit down and you just can't think for some reason, it's because you've not warmed up properly. So I guess what I'm calling variance here is sometimes you could drop the word variance and just call it poor brain power, but there is some natural variance to it. That's why I use that tag at the end, brain power variance. I mean, the part that is controllable is like I say, you know, playing at good times of the day, not playing after you eat. That's a common one. Digesting kind of like slows down the brain and all other parts of the body while that operation is going on. And doing the test drive is good. So just be aware, have a feel for what your kind of, if you rank your game from A to D, as many poker players do, have a feel for what your kind of B minus C plus game looks like. That's your average. Then if you're ever playing like your C or C minus game, C game might be okay, but C minus game probably not. That's probably too weak and you should avoid playing. So maybe even get a sheet of paper or get a Word document and keep a little journal. I advise my students to keep learning journals all the time, but actually mark out like what your brain power was that day. Was it A, B, C, or D? I guess brain power variance is like, do you play your A game, B game, C game? That kind of thing. Of course, improving the worst part of your game, as per Inchworm and Jared Tendler's The Mental Game of Poker, is a good idea. Like if you make your D game what your C game used to be, that limits the damage and allows you to play even at lower brain power. Like right now, I'm a very experienced player, so I feel naturally that my D game is still plus EV. It's not that much worse. It is much worse than my B game or my C game or my A game, but it's nowhere near as much worse than an aspiring player's D game would be compared to his C, B, or A game. The gap between your best and your worst is highest when you're at your lowest proficiency in what you're doing, basically. So that's just kind of the way it goes. So brain power variance is something that you need to be conscious of, keep a journal of it, track it, and try to avoid playing when your brain power is low. You need to acknowledge it, because if you don't, you end up playing your D game all the time just because you're in a rut and you've not done anything to shake out of it. Your brain power sucks, but you think because a week ago that you were playing well that you should just be able to play well just by sitting, just by turning up. It's like when sports people get complacent. They think all they have to do to win is turn up, and oftentimes that backfires unless they're insanely gifted, I suppose. In real life variance, IRL. This is the next thing. So real life often has a pretty major effect on the way you play poker. This is linked to one. Like a lot of the time, stuff that goes on in brain power variance is caused by IRL variance. Now, I won't go into too much detail here, but you guys can kind of imagine what sort of things we're talking about here. I think IRL variance is best defined as just anything that's completely got nothing to do with poker at all. So, for example, if one day, let's say you wake up and just get some terrible news, it's probably not a good idea to play poker while your brain is still kind of adjusting to that news, like your pet died that day, whatever. Just doesn't make sense to play when you're in an emotionally bad state of mind, because when emotions are interfering and running high, obviously it's harder to make good decisions, it's harder to have a good logical thought process, basically. Other in real life things that can be an issue are just like stress, tiredness, working too much, again, playing your sessions at bad times in the day, having a fight with the wife and deciding that you should play poker to get over it or to unwind. Using poker as any kind of de-stressing tool is a terrible idea, because it's not. Poker is actually something that heightens your thought processes and your emotions, and it engages you. So it's actually something that you need to rise to, not use to de-stress. It doesn't work that way. It's likely to stress you out more. So IRL variance is something you need to be aware of. It's just a matter of being sensible and just not playing when things are affecting you in a bad way. Like the professional poker player needs to get less affected by IRL variance. Like he still, if a bad thing happens in your life, a moderately bad thing that kind of pisses you off or makes you sad, you still normally go to work. And for the professional poker player, this is also the case. Like he still has to turn up. He or she still has to turn up and do his or her job, play poker. And so you kind of have to work on the mental muscle if you're like a serious poker player, of not letting those kind of things bother you. However, I think there will be inevitably a degree to which you can't eliminate in real life variance, and I'm not saying you should never play when bad things go wrong. It's just a matter of being aware of how likely it is to affect your game. Again, keeping a mental journal of how you play under these circumstances is good. And for the aspiring player who's not professional, doesn't rely on poker for their full source of income, which should be the case with most of my listeners, I would imagine, like players learning the game. For these players, it's not, or for you guys, I should say, it's not really that important that you put in volume every single time that you have a poker slot allocated. Sure, you might have a routine where you study half an hour, then play for 2 hours every night, and that's fine if that's the right study-play ratio based on where you're at right now and you're fairly competent and advanced in the aspiring player stage. If you're not, you should probably have a higher ratio of study to play than that. But the thing is, if you're feeling bad because something's upset you that day, or something's gone wrong and your mind's just not in the right state due to in real life variance, or you're expecting deliveries at the door, or you know that you have to like take a phone call in 20 minutes, or you have to have a conversation while playing, these things just don't play. Just study instead. Your study is maybe a bit reduced by not being in the best frame of mind, but it's never going to be negative. The EV of studying is never going to be negative based on that. So basically, just be aware. The more aware you are of these external variance factors, the better you can deal with them, the less you can allow them to affect your game. Okay, the third type of variance, and this is one I just spoke about a little bit in my video, is unforced error variance. So this is where hero makes an error that's unforced in the sense that he understands the situation at hand usually very well and would never normally make this kind of mistake. Imagine like a game of tennis where you get like the best players in the world, like Federer, Djokovic, or Andy Murray or whatever. They wouldn't normally hit a serve that was so far out that it was just nowhere near the court. But occasionally this is going to happen. Like it has happened. If you look at like professional tennis matches, there have been shots hit that look like they were hit by complete amateurs. And this is due to unforced error variance. The human brain, body, etc. is not capable of performing like a consistent robot. Like my computer will never make a mistake when I tell it to calculate a sum. If I put in like a complex mathematical problem, it will always give me the right answer, as long as the program works. The human mind, even if it's a good mathematician, will still fail and will still produce an inaccurate answer sometimes, just less often than someone who's worse at maths. And poker is the same. The beginning player will make way more unforced errors in simpler spots, and that's very normal. And the more experienced player will make way less, but will still make some in spots that he or she thinks that he or she shouldn't make those errors in. For example, you might think that you're very good at understanding sizing on the river, like it's an area that you've looked at a lot. You know when your range is polarized, that larger sizing is theoretically correct. You know when to exploitatively deviate your sizing to exploit a player and manipulate their calling range in your favor. But still on the river, you size your bet horribly. Like you bet really, really big in a spot where your range evidently contains mostly value hands. You just don't have air, and villain knows this, or something like that. In this situation, what you've made is an unforced error. It's an error that you probably shouldn't have made, or wouldn't normally. I shouldn't say shouldn't have made, because you will sometimes. It's inevitable, but you won't make often. And the key thing here is to acknowledge that unforced errors are not necessarily symptoms that something is majorly wrong. So instead of going, oh, what an idiot, I've made no progress in the last 6 months, obviously I've just done really badly, you instead want to say, okay, this is just something that happens. There's a difference between something happening rarely and that being something that shouldn't happen. It should happen sometimes, it just shouldn't happen often. That's the key. So accepting a few howlers, like horrible mistakes in your game, is very normal, and it's kind of something that you actually have to do. If you don't, then you're neglecting unforced error variance, and you're not really understanding the true nature of the variance, external variance in poker, i.e. your ability fluctuating due to things that are unbeknown to you or completely out with your control. Another type of variance is opponent skill variance. Like sometimes your opponents will just randomly play terribly, and sometimes they'll play very well. It's kind of like this in bridge actually as well. Like I play a lot of bridge these days, and you'll find that sometimes you just perform badly on a certain hand because everyone else did something. All your other opponents, if that makes sense. Okay, so when you're playing bridge, just really briefly, you're not actually playing against people across the table from you. You're playing the people who are playing the same cards as you on the other tables, and sometimes their opponents, i.e., the opponents of your true opponents, will do stupid stuff, and it's out with your control, and that gives your real opponents a great score. And that's problematic because it's not your fault. You performed well, you lost out. In poker, the same thing can happen. Like, fish can make all their terrible plays against other regs and not against you. A fish might be really tilted and just do something completely incomprehensibly awful against you, but not against other regs. You might have a reg who normally plays solidly, who just one day implodes and just donates you 3 stacks for no reason. This is variance. You have to be in the right place at the right time. It's not variance in the way the cards fall. Well, it is kind of to get the shot at that, but how often that player spews off to you or makes really good plays against you is not down to you. And so it's, again, just another thing that you need to realise, another part of poker variance that's external to the way the cards fall and shouldn't be neglected. Sometimes it happens. So if someone, like if you're at the table and you see the fish donating stacks left, right and centre but not to you, don't get pissed off about that because you've got no right to it. It's just like losing a few flips in a row. You weren't in the right place at the right time. C'est la vie. Okay, so the last aspect of external variance I want to talk about today is mental game variance. And mental game variance is quite similar to brain power variance. It's just that I used the first point, brain power variance, to talk about your technical ability to think logically, strategically, and problem solve at the table. And I'm going to use the fifth point here, mental game variance, to refer to how you deal emotionally with the situations that you get into. Some days you'll be more stable than others. That's down to point number 2 in real life variance. And it will affect point number 3, how often you make unforced errors. So all of these are kind of interlinked. But mental game variance is just basically just how well you react to a certain thing on a certain day. Like one day you'll play a hand where you get set oversetted for a stack and you just won't care. You've had a good day, you're in a positive frame of mind, it's fine emotionally, you're balanced. It's going to take a lot to offset you that day. Another day, possibly due to, in real life variance, possibly due to factors in your brain that you've got no idea about, you feel vulnerable. Like you're kind of balancing on the edge of you're balancing on the edge of like a wire, and it's going to take just the slightest gust of wind to blow you off into Tilt City, basically. That's kind of how it can feel at times. And knowing where you are in that mental game variance spectrum and becoming aware of the mental game and your own conscious state and being mindful of it is super important to actually being able to diffuse the effect that mental game variance has on your win rate. Because what you can do when you're aware of it is abstain from playing poker at that point because you just know it's going to be minus EV or not plus EV enough to be worth it for your time. Remember that there's no point playing poker to break even. If you're a serious player, your time there would be far better spent studying. That's higher EV use of your time. It's a better way to divide it. And another thing you can do is just learn a treatment, like learn logical injections, like in Jared Tenler's very good book, The Mental Game of Poker. There are things that you can do and say steps you can take and do and say to yourself to basically train your brain to stop thinking in the kind of subconscious way that it thinks in that's bad for you. So if you always get really pissed off when someone sucks out on you, the idea is, and I've talked about this in past podcasts, and so is Jared Tenler, the idea is that you train awareness first so that you're able to identify when it's happening, why it's happening, and then you have like what he calls a logical injection, which is like a little phrase that you can say to yourself to diffuse it. So you could say something like, this is absolutely meaningless, it's the long run that matters, and in the long run I profit here. I don't know. That's a very generic, kind of basic, boring example, but you get the point. So being aware of the mental game variance involved in poker helps you play at better times. It helps you just be more humble and realistic. Don't have a huge ego and be like, I don't have a tilt problem, I'm just going to play like 6,000 hands today, I'm fine, even though you're pissed off. I've been there. It doesn't work. Forcing volume when your mental game is bad, and your mental game might just be bad for like a week. Like, I don't know, man. I find like some days I'm just pissed off and I don't know why. It just happens sometimes, and other days I'm completely fine. And there's nothing that I'm aware of consciously that's going on in life that should make that the case. But sometimes you're more irritable, you're more easily offset than others. And just being aware of where you are on that scale, where 1 is, completely fine, solid, unlikely to tilt unless the worst of the worst variance occurs in a short space of time, and 5 is like, if anyone wins a pot against me, I'm going to explode. Know where you are on that scale and have, again, a minimum standard that is the weakest mental game that you're willing to accept. You might not know what causes brain power variance or mental game variance, but you can check where you are on the respective scales and decide whether or not you actually want to play based on that. Anyway, this has been Characters for the Carrot Poker Podcast. If you want to get in touch with me for coaching on either the mental game or the technical game or both of poker, then you can get in touch at admin@carrotcorner.com or check out the website www.carrotcorner.com, and my book is on there. There's a preview, it's for sale. And yeah, also check out, there's a 2+2 thread on the books and publications section of the forum, where you can read some reviews or leave some reviews or ask some questions about my book, as long as you do it in a kind of more objective, less not so biased way. They like impartiality on that site for sure. I've already had a couple of reviews removed from 2+2 just because they were very positive, which is a shame. So maybe tell me that I suck when you do that, and that might allow just tell me I suck and then tell me lots of good stuff as well. Maybe that'll balance it out. Who knows? But anyway, I hope those of you who've bought the book are enjoying reading it, and please continue to leave me feedback. See you on the next episode for more stuff. I'm probably going to bring some more students onto the show and do some technical work on their game, because I feel like it's been kind of a while since I've brought anyone on for purposes of actually working on their game. We've been doing Ask the Coach and stuff like that, but yeah, loads more I want to do. Really excited to get back going with this podcast now. I've got a bit more time having finished the book, so yeah, we'll look forward to more episodes very soon. Thanks for listening.